Good morning. As Stephen mentioned, I'm Bryan Chambers. I'm our president, and one of our co-founders at Capital Factory, but I wear a lot of hats. I'm also the founder of a local nonprofit where I sit on the board of an organization called Venture Dallas, and I'm also on the faculty at the University of Texas at Dallas, where I teach at the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. But it's really because of UT Dallas that I got to know Sandy and the Center for Brain Health. In fact, I'll never forget the first time I saw Sandy present, and I learned about the big, bold mission of the Center for Brain Health. It was fall of 2017, and I saw her give a talk at UT Dallas. She shared this big, bold vision, and it still inspires me greatly today. If there's one word I can think about to describe Sandy, it's fearless. It takes a fearless leader to break through walls and lead a mission like this one, and with more energy than ever. Congratulations on your 25th anniversary. What an incredible milestone. And I'm just so thankful to be included. She also certainly knows how to put a room together. I've learned that. While it was through UT Dallas that we first met, it was actually Capital Factory and our Texas Fund that really brought us together as friends, as supporters of each other's work, and as collaborators. And I'm really excited about our future. One of my favorite things about venture capital, unlike private equity, is venture capital is a team sport. And it really takes a lot of investors working together to help advance the technology and the outcomes of life science startups like the ones that you will see today. The truth is that our investments in Neurotech are really enabled by one of our incredible partners, Dr. Amy Kruse, who's we're just so fortunate to have a close working relationship with, and who's on our board at Capital Factory. In fact, 5 of the selected showcase companies today, I actually think we've got 4 of them. One of them, unfortunately, wasn't able to make it, but of these 4, and the one that couldn't make it, Motif Neuro, we know 4 of those 5 because of Amy. And we've co-invested a number of times with Amy. We first launched the Texas Fund almost 3 years ago now. And since in last September, we celebrated an incredible milestone marking our 100th unique portfolio company. Now I think it's a little bit closer to 120 or 130 unique portfolio companies. We've been actively investing in some of the most exciting neurotech startups like the ones you'll see today, who will showcase a very wide range of promising neurotech applications. And there's also a number of other portfolio companies that we have that are also participating in the Expo. So please go check them out, try some of the demos. They're super cool. Please help me welcome Founder and Chief Investment Officer at Satori Neuro, Dr. Amy Kruse.
Thank you so much. And I guess for me, the feeling of being in this room and it's that sort of like in your bones feeling when you're with your people, like you are my people. Like we are going to do great things together, and I'm a doer, so I'm in. I'm all in. And today I just wanted to give you a little blitz through my view into the innovation landscape as an investor. As Bryan mentioned, I'm a Chief Investment Officer at Satori Neuro. It is a brand new venture fund that is focused on mental health, brain health, and wellness. The application of neuroscience technologies and what I call human flourishing, right? Because we're talking about not just kind of the downside stuff that we're talking about, but also the upside. So I have 3 principles. A lot of people have asked me, especially over the last couple, sort of year as I've been out on the road, like, what's new? What's changed? Why now? Right? And so for me, I sort of sat down and thought about it, and these are some themes you will hear from today. You've already heard, right? From synapses to systems thinking. Neurotech catches up with Moore's Law. We're going to hear a little bit more about that today. And all roads lead to neuroplasticity. So from synapses to systems thinking, when I was a graduate student, Everything was very molecular neurobiology focused. Neuroscience itself came like from the bottom up, and we are now facing, because of the data we have, because of the imaging we have, because of the resources we have, we now understand the brain at the network level. When you understand the brain at the network level, you have the ability to change that system in many different ways. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. You're going to hear from some of these companies today and the ways they're modulating the brain using this sort of systems thinking. But this is a big idea. This is a big breakthrough. The second thing is that neurotech has finally caught up with Moore's law, not the other way around. We now have the ability to build microsystems, things that can go into the vasculature, things that can go into the brain, even smaller devices that allow us to modulate the brain in different ways, record and stimulate. This is really important because when you couple that with the systems thinking that we talked about, you can now actually decode information out of those systems and put information into those systems. This is a big deal. And then all roads lead to neuroplasticity. I'm just giving some examples of neurostimulation here because that's sort of one of my hot topics, one of the things that I'm most excited about from a non-invasive perspective. But you've already heard this morning the myriad ways that we can change the brain and change the nervous system. Neuroplasticity is the fundamental underpinning and understanding of the way that we can actually change our brains, both in terms of handling disease, as well as in terms of, like we talked about, that upside. Right? So I'm a yes and investor. People say, oh, is it this or that? Is it invasive or non-invasive? Is it what's happening in psychedelics, or is it non-invasive neurostimulation? I always say yes and, because we are building an immense toolkit of ways that we are starting to look at this, not only the mental health space, what's happening in neurodegeneration, what's happening in cognition, what's happening in human performance. We are funding all of the things in this ecosystem. So yes, and therapeutics, yes, and devices. We already heard about precision neuroscience, precision psychiatry. We want to get left of boom. You can't get left of boom without biomarkers, right? Those are things that we need. And then, of course, the infrastructure and services. We heard a little bit about that this morning already. How do people access this care? I'm a foot stamper, so I'm going to stomp my foot and say, I believe we are going to deliver neuro care in different ways in the next decade. We are going to break down the sort of stovepipes of neurologists, psychiatrists, family practice, and we're going to put all of those resources in new areas. And I think places like the Center for Brain Health are leading the way there. And so just a couple of little, this is more of a take a picture while I'm talking slide chart, but it's sort of what are the things that are exciting right now? I've talked about, brain-computer interfaces, but I'm really excited about what's happening with the microbiome, the gut-brain axis, how our digestive system, which by the way has a massive, sort of nervous system of its own, is influencing the brain. What's happening with augmented reality, virtual reality? Who knows what's going to happen with the Apple Vision Pro being out now? And then, a couple other things that I referred to, including what's happening in the psychedelic medicine space. So finally, I love to say bold things because I think, we're talking about the future of brain health here. Right now, invasive brain-computer interfaces, right? They can kind of decode. You're going to hear from Paradromics today, a company that we've invested in, about, the progress they're making towards that. But in 10 years, right, implanted BCIs will be the first-line treatment for degenerative motor conditions. Spinal cord injuries, they'll be repaired, and then maybe some crazy people will actually have off-label use of brain-computer interfaces. We don't know. But this is the trajectory of where we're headed, and we need to think about that, not just what we can do now, but what we can do in the future. Precision psychiatry, already mentioned this, right? Biomarkers, we need biomarkers. We need standard of care that includes mental health checkups. Someday, like we heard this morning, you will actually be able to have the biomarkers and other things that give you the index of your brain health. Your phone, which will, right now reminds me of how many steps I've had and how many times I've stood up and down, will actually start reminding me about my mental health, right? And talk about getting left of boom, right? Standard of care will be screening children for the propensity towards mental health based on perhaps genetic factors, epigenetic factors, or trauma that they've been through. And then I always love sleep. I always end with sleep because sleep is, I think, one of the places that neuroscience and neurotechnology will, be one of the places that influences us the most. But, right now we just have watches and I got my Oura ring and it tells me what a bad sleeper I am, and it's up to me to change that behavior, right? I've augmented my sleep hygiene, to do that. But eventually we'll be able to actually program our sleep. I think using some of these non-invasive neurotechnologies will actually be able to do that and change that. And so, some future thoughts for you. And now I'm going to tee up my friend, Daniel Powell. Daniel and I actually met in Cleveland, of all places. We were at a Cleveland neurodesign workshop, which is sort of the Stanford design, biodesign curriculum applied to the neurotechnology sector. We, do a kind of a hot weekend of like cramming all the students together and actually getting to do that. Daniel and I were faculty together there and have been friends ever since, and super pleased to bring him to the Capital Factory family. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you so much. Wow, you're animated. This is tough on me. I am not that animated. Not many are. But everybody laughed. Thank you. That was confidence building. So I'm Daniel Powell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spark Biomedical. Thank you for the opportunity to present and share the work we're doing. We are mostly Dallas-based, so this is right in our backyard. We are a medical device company focused on mental health and addiction. Our first generation product, the Sparrow Ascent, has been approved by the FDA. It's a wearable neurostimulation system that stimulates cranial nerves, specifically the vagus and trigeminal cranial nerves, and can alleviate opioid withdrawal. This has also been adapted for newborn babies, and we are in clinical trials at Parkland Hospital and MUSC, taking babies born dependent on opioids who go through just really a heartbreaking first month of their life, and looking at using this technology to alleviate their withdrawal. We believe in the theme of brain health and neurodevelopment, that we're going to have and be able to prove a massive improvement on their overall neurocognition because we're reducing this vast amounts of opioids they're giving post-birth. We've been very successful with NIH funding, patents, and then again, we're on market with the Sparrow Ascent. I want to talk about addiction for a little bit, and specifically the opioid epidemic. I think most of us, if not directly, you have a friend who's been directly affected by the opioid epidemic over the last 20 years. There's over nearly 12 million Americans who are misusing or overusing opioids, mostly because of how addictive and dependent you become, not because they are misbehaving or choosing a bad lifestyle. The number one reason we have the opioid epidemic is the vast difficulty of withdrawal. So when we look at what opioids do to the brain, it makes it extremely dependent. And opioid withdrawal comes in two components. Part of it is an overwhelming sense of fight or flight. You have a broken amygdala where you process fear and pain, and anybody who goes through opioid withdrawal will tell you they swear they were going to die. They believed it with all their heart. So you're taking this out of the realm of willpower, good behavior, the desire to have a better life, and your caveman brain is saying, run, there's a saber-toothed tiger coming from you, you're going to die. And that is the neurological challenge of the opioid epidemic. The other component of withdrawal is like the worst flu you've ever had. You have absolute aches in your joints, you're running to the bathroom every 15 minutes with gastric distress, sweating through is just extreme discomfort. So the way our system works is we're driving a signal through both the vagus nerve and the trigeminal nerves, which come up near the ear. We call this auricular neurostem. And we are creating a network effect, to the point made earlier, within the network, and we are bringing the patient out of fight or flight. This happens in about 1 hour. So you could take somebody in full-blown opioid withdrawal on the ground in the fetal position, having a really bad day. In about 1 hour stimulation, they could be sitting here in the audience, sitting pretty still, fairly comfortable. Won't be 100% relieving of withdrawal symptoms, but about 1 out of 3 have 100% relief in an hour. And then simultaneously, as we bring them out of the fight or flight, we're driving endorphin production, replacing that exogenous opioid with an endorphin that alleviates the pains and aches coming with the withdrawal. What's great about this is it's non-addictive, it's non-pharmaceutical, it's no side effects, can be used with any other therapy. This is what our FDA clinical trial looked like. So not an ideal situation. The FDA made us drive the patients into moderate withdrawal, then take them out of it. You send them in one direction, and it's hard to reverse it. But our current clinical trials, what we do is we get them on the device as soon as they walk in and prevent withdrawal from ever setting in. But this is what the FDA wanted, so we did it. So moderate withdrawal there as a COW score, the clinical opioid withdrawal scale of a 15 was the average. And we had a 50% reduction in that first hour. Most incredibly, though, is days 2 and 3 when the withdrawal symptoms would be increasing more and more. We were able to continue to hold down, and this is with continuous stim, so they're wearing the system throughout the day. Our first baby study was very successful. We did a pilot study. We really didn't know what to expect. We didn't even know if all the nerve fibers had completed forming and would be accessible. But on this scale, we measured reduction in morphine. So the average, the nationwide standard for treating babies with NOWs is to give them morphine every 4 hours. And then if their withdrawal, right before you give them the morphine, if their withdrawal has not crossed a threshold, you reduce the dose. And so the goal is to reduce the dose, and the national average is about 23.5 days to wean the babies off morphine. Our average was less than 9 days in this first study, and we really were guessing at the dosing and everything. So this has gone on to be funded by the NIH for a full-blown phase 2 study, currently in process. We're hoping to finish enrollment for this and send it to the FDA by the end of the year. Big picture though, withdrawal was our beachhead, but we are really looking at the full continuum of addiction. So we have studies started in acute stress reaction, trauma, which begets PTSD. We have a PTSD study just hit the news in Cincinnati today. We're partnered with University of Cincinnati for co-occurring PTSD and OUD. And then we're looking at long-term addiction, not just withdrawal, but we should finish our study in June, where with the world-famous Hazleton Betty Ford as one of our clinical sites. And we're looking at using our system in neurostimulation over a prolonged time to build neuroplasticity. I love when we plan this. To build neuroplasticity and to retrain an addicted brain to behave as one that doesn't, that can produce its own endorphins, that can manage cravings and all the pressures. Kind of business model, brick and mortar, government, but what's really interesting, and the only reason I put this in here, is telehealth has been huge. When I started the company in 2018, if I got up here and said I'm going to do addiction management telehealth, it would have been ridiculous. And now it's expected. And what's really good about this is this meets people where they are. Nobody actually wants to go into rehab. About 1% of the patients go into an inpatient facility. People have jobs. People have dogs. People have children. Probably prioritized in that order. And they don't want to go to rehab. They want to recover from the comfort of their home. And so we're delivering that. We launched telehealth at the end of last year. It's going really well. And we just keep getting testimonials back left and right. One of the biggest problems for a company like this is reimbursement. So this is cash pay, unfortunately. We are on the path to get a durable medical equipment code this year. It just sucks. It's just a bad process. Us in the neurotech world, especially wearable, we get stuck in this DME category, which is meant for crutches and wheelchairs and stuff like that, and it doesn't match up. So we do have, a tough road ahead in getting nationwide coverage, but it's part of the mission to get there as quick as possible. But on that, again, thank you for a chance to share our story with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel and Spark Biomedical are not only a Capital Factory portfolio company, but actually a portfolio company of the UT Dallas Seed Fund, which is a fund that I helped start for the University of Texas at Dallas, and I teach my class around, so 2 times invested. I asked Amy if I could help introduce this next founder. I first met David back in 2017 when we held an investment challenge. We called it a Relocate Your Business to Texas investment challenge. And David was the recipient of that first investment, if I'm not mistaken. He was just maybe 17 or 18 years old when this happened, and he relocated his business, his business idea, which he started in high school, relocated to Texas, and I believe we were his very first investor. It's been a heck of a journey working with David, and I'm excited for you to learn all about Senseye and his mission. Please help me welcome David Zachariah, founder of Senseye. Thank you for joining us from Austin.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm David. I'm the CEO and founder of Senseye. We're a startup based in Austin, Texas, and I'm excited to tell you about what we're working on. So our mission at Senseye is we want to solve the mental health crisis. And as large and complicated and really personal of an issue as that has become, we think the fundamental reason why there is a mental health crisis in the first place, and at least the first step in solving it, is actually pretty straightforward. And it's that there's no measurement in the space whatsoever. The way that we diagnose and manage mental health patients today is the equivalent of diagnosing someone with type 2 diabetes but never measuring their blood sugar, which seems like such a ridiculous concept, but that is what the standard of care is right now. There does exist very accurate, standardized way to diagnose some mental health indications. The problem is it requires a very specialist psychologist or psychiatrist who's trained in how to use a very particular scale and has 5 or 6 hours with you, which just doesn't happen. And as a result of the fact that there is such a major shortage of psychologists and psychiatrists, about 80% of all mental health in the United States is being diagnosed and treated exclusively in primary care. And the last surveillance study that the NIH did showed that the best diagnosed mental health condition in the United States was major depression, and it was misdiagnosed about 65% of the time, and that's the best. And as you get to more complex conditions like PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar, that misdiagnosis rate skyrockets between 85 and 90%. And this is not the fault of the clinician. It's certainly not the fault of the patient. It's just kind of the reality of a system that's purely based on patient self-reporting, especially when the symptom clusters of these indications are so similar. And so our mission at Senseye is to build the first diagnostic, essentially build the first diagnostic and severity monitoring platform for mental health. And a very big part of our strategy is that we don't think it's possible to actually make a change in the clinical journey of a patient unless you can establish a gold standard in a field that right now doesn't really have any. And so beside for the technology, which I'll explain in a second, the primary way that we differentiate ourselves from a lot of others who are trying to measure mental health is that we're pursuing FDA approval as a full standalone diagnostic for all the indications we're going after. So we're not just trying to build another screening tool, but an actual diagnostic. And so the way the product works, the first time a patient interacts with it, it's about an 11.5-minute test on a phone. We show different types of ocular stimuli while we videotape your eye's response to it. And then on the other side of that, we spit out a binary diagnosis and a severity score. There's then a 4.5-minute version of the test that a clinician can have a patient take as often as they want, up to a maximum of once a week, as a way to see how that severity is changing over time in response to treatment. And from a neuroscience perspective, there's not much that we're doing that's actually new. It's been very well established in the literature for a long time that diagnosing this way is possible. The problem has been, in order to measure a lot of the more novel ocular metrics you have to measure, you traditionally have needed a series of very large and expensive eye trackers that would cost anywhere between $30,000 and $100,000, and you need several of them because there's not one eye tracker that is able to measure all the metrics. And so our breakthrough is less about the neuroscience, and it's more we've built the computer vision to do with the front-facing camera of a cell phone what you normally need those very large and expensive eye trackers for. And so it's that new technology that's allowing us to operationalize a lot of the existing literature. And there's basically three main categories of things that we're measuring. The first is all of the conventional ocular metrics you would think of, so things like pupil size, blinks, saccades, gaze, eye movement. The second is slightly more novel. We've kind of barely scratched the surface here, but we're able to measure changes in the dilator and sphincter of the iris of the eye. The dilator is innervated by the sympathetic nervous system and the sphincter by the parasympathetic, and so we can actually understand what part of the nervous system we're actually activating. And then the third is measuring heart rate variability off the face, and so it's really those three main things combined that's allowing us to deliver a diagnosis. We're currently in the FDA clinical trial path for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. We're wrapping up our phase 2 clinical trial for all three of them right now, and we're starting our phase 3 probably in May or June. This is kind of a stupid, simple slide trying to, our results are much longer than this, but the long story short is our sensitivity specificity right now is about 0.87 across all three indications. We think by the time we submit to FDA, we'll be somewhere between 0.85 and 0.9. As we get on market and we have a lot, a much larger amount of data, we think the accuracy will kind of slowly go up. But it's just kind of the reality of mental health. There are so many things that can kind of disrupt it that until you get to tens of millions of patients, you probably can't diagnose at a accuracy level much higher than that. So this is what our timeline looks like right now. We're anticipating launching PTSD by the end of the year. It's a class 2 de novo medical device. And then where we have landed with our review team is that all the subsequent indications that have a control group on our current trials can essentially be 510K'd on top of it. And then in terms of our go-to-market strategy, right now about 75% of all mental health in the United States is being diagnosed and managed on telehealth. And so because what we built is 100% software, a big part of our strategy is instead of going doctor to doctor, and selling it as a more traditional medical device, we basically built it as a software development kit. It essentially can integrate directly into as many of the telehealth platforms as there are, and it just becomes a standard way that you are able to diagnose and track severity of patients. And with that, I think that's my time, so thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, David. One of the things I think you'll notice from today and from the presentations that we're hearing from these companies is that they've done something very remarkable, which is they have survived the valley of death, which you may have heard about, where great ideas go to languish and not get turned into products. And as Bryan mentioned, I have my colleague from back in the day at DARPA, Dr. Jeff Ling. One of the things that we worried most about at DARPA was if the great ideas that came out of the programs that we launched would actually make it into commercial use. In this case, become medical devices in some of the cases. And so, it's really my pleasure to introduce Matt Engel today. Matt and I were part of that DARPA Neurotechnology community and knew each other through that. But then when I became an investor, initially at Prime Movers Lab as a partner and general partner, we were reintroduced by the folks at Perot-Jane. And so I thought it was pretty fitting that, kind of this whole thing comes together. And so really excited to introduce Matt and have him share with you what's exciting about the face of invasive BCI. Matt.
Thanks, Amy, for that introduction. So Paradromics is one of the 2 high data rate brain-computer interfaces in the world. If you want to touch one, I have one here with me. I'll show you it later. It's pretty cool. Brain-computer interfaces, what are they? They're modems for the brain. So it's a way that you can exchange data directly with the brain, read out what someone's thinking, even put information back into a brain. So why is that exciting? I think something that encapsulates why Paradromics is building a brain-computer interface is a quote from former NFL player living with ALS, Steve Gleason. And he said, until there's a cure, technology is the cure. And he was speaking about ALS, but I think that you can apply that across the board, whether it's spinal cord injury, mental illness. There are a lot of really hard biology problems, especially in neurological mental health, where the biological cure could be decades away. At the same time, we understand the brain as a data organ. It fundamentally, everything we see, everything we do is data inside of our brain. So if we can access that data and influence it, we have a way of treating it at the level of data, even when the bio problem is not treatable. And so what we're building is the highest data rate brain-computer interface in the world. It is 1,684 individual microwires, each of which can record what are called action potentials, the signals from individual neurons in the brain. But it wasn't enough. There's another prominent high data rate brain-computer interface company out there that you may have heard of. I think one place where we differ from them in our ethos of approaching the space is device longevity. We think it's not enough to build a device that is going to be high data rate and is going to do the thing, but it also has to do the thing for a long time. The commitment to a patient when you implant a brain-computer interface is that they're going to have it for a while and that's going to be a durable therapy. And so our design input is basically get as much data in and out of the brain as possible while being able to commit to a multi-year device lifetime to minimize the number of surgeries that a person is going to have to undergo. And you can see, for anyone who has perhaps seen a deep brain stimulator before, our form factor is very similar to existing medical devices. That's by design. We want to build something that people are going to feel comfortable implanting. Our first application for this is going to be for the people who need it most. People who have lost the ability to communicate due to severe loss of motor function, either because of ALS, spinal cord injury, or stroke. There are about 150,000 people in the US who can't communicate any longer, and even just saying I love you is painstaking exercise of moving their eyes. For those people, we know because of older brain-computer interface studies with older devices that it's possible for them to use a computer cursor, to type, even to speak using a brain-computer interface. So that's something that is low-hanging fruit that the technology can provide for them. If anyone's interested in taking a look at this later, this is a little bit of a kind of landscape analysis for ways of interacting with the brain. I think it's important to understand there are a lot of different ways to read out brain data. There are wearable devices. Ramses is going to tell you about Neurable, an awesome company in the wearable space. If you can do something with a wearable device, you sure as hell don't want to get a brain implant to do the same thing. I'm just a level set. There are deep brain stimulators that can go deep into the brain but have very low data rate. There's some amazing devices that can go through the blood vessels. They lack the precision of a Paradromics or a Neuralink device, but they can do other things. And so it's kind of a horses for courses situation where you have to understand, what am I trying to accomplish? What's the least invasive device that can accomplish that? Now, where we are on the spectrum is when you need a lot of data. When you're doing something like restoring communication to someone where data is the currency of the therapy, or when you're trying to restore vision, or when you're trying to read out mental states with very high accuracy, and you need data, then you need a implanted intracortical device that can measure single neuron activity. And we call that a direct data interface. And we optimize for signal quality, individual neuron readout, and then quantity of neurons that can be read out. And so that's the space that we're operating in. When we think about modems, I actually find it really interesting to think about the parallel developments in the brain-computer interface industry and the internet. So if we wind back time, all of the clinical trials that you may have seen on YouTube where people are speaking using a BCI, are controlling a robotic hand using a BCI, these were all done with a technology that was invented in 1989. The Utah array, currently built and distributed by BlackRock Neurotech, another awesome company. If we think about what we were using the internet for in 1989, 1990, and then think about how the uses of the internet evolved over the 30 years subsequent, what you see is that there was this trend where increasingly there were modems with better upload and download speed, better internet infrastructure, and then you could do more. So 80s and early 90s, internet was text-based. And then there was enough download speed that you could start downloading images, and you could have image-based web pages. In 2010, Netflix became a streaming company. For those of us who are old enough to remember Netflix in 2009, it was a kind of low-tech company. Like, they mailed DVDs, you open it up, it's got like 10 people's fingerprints on it. You have to, it wasn't the giant that it is today until there was enough download speed that people could stream real-time video. The history of the internet is the history of applications being gated by hardware and applications being built on top of that and a huge amount of value being created. And now think that the 1989 modems got better. The 1989 BCI hasn't changed since, honestly, a few weeks ago when Neuralink implanted the first next generation device in a person. And so now we're going to be on this honestly really exciting and accelerated path where you have companies that are building, we talked about backlog of kind of Moore's law. There's been 30 years of Moore's law since brain-computer interfaces were first coming into the fore. And now all of that backlog is going to be used for building better interfaces. So what we're going to see is an explosion of applications in BCI that parallels what happened in the internet. And so it's going to start with, the highest degree of unmet need, people who can't communicate, and then increasingly it's going to be people who can't move and want more bodily autonomy, people who can't see or can't hear, getting data into their brain, mental health. We've talked about biomarkers for mental health. Imagine how much more clarity you have when you can actually go into the brain and read out at full bandwidth what's going on in the brain. That's like a real continuous glucose monitor when you can read high density of mental states. And so all of this means that the first 1 million people to get BCIs will be people with severe unmet medical needs. And when you have 1 million people safely using brain-computer interfaces for useful things, then you're sitting on that precipice where you can have a rational discussion about what comes next. But in the meantime, there's a massive amount of value creation. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I think, before I bring Ramses up, I wanted to say a couple things about the neurotech landscape in Texas. I think even just what you've seen so far this morning, there is an absolute momentum building around bringing incredible neurotech companies to Texas. We have the engineering talent, we have the resources, we have some other big companies in North Texas that may eventually acquire some of these companies. There's a lot of goodness here. One of the companies that couldn't join us today, they were at their company offsite actually doing their strategy, was Motif Neurotech, another company that's in the neurotech space. Matt referred to what's happening in mental health. Motif is actually building micro devices that are minimally invasive, so they don't go into the depth of the brain, but they actually go into the skull and deliver the same type of energy that a transcranial magnetic stimulation system delivers, but in essentially like the size of a half of a sugar cube or a quarter of a sugar cube, right? That work was initially developed through the support of the DARPA N-Cubed program, and Jacob has most recently raised an $18.75 million round to actually transition that technology into initial first in human and then obviously onto commercialization. And so I think with Motif's most recent funding, fortunately, I was able to be a part of that through my investment. I joined the board as one of the investors. We are really accelerating, right? Like the things that you've heard about so far, Matt and Daniel and even David, those are things that I think the investment landscape is really catching up with, and I think we're really in a strong position in terms of investment. And so just wanted to sort of highlight that and also mention Motif since they couldn't be here today. I think you've also had a little bit of a tour of the landscape of the yes and, right? So we've talked about invasive brain-computer interfaces, we've talked about neurostimulation, we've talked about precision psychiatry, and now we're going to talk about non-invasive brain-computer interfaces. And to do that, I'm going to bring Ramses up to the stage and let him take it away.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Is the mic on? Awesome. Hey everybody. So I want to start off by sharing with you all a story. When I was in grad school, I noticed something that completely changed my life. You know, there's individuals with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that didn't even know that they had these disease states until 10 years into the disease itself. I met individuals with ALS who made end-of-life decisions based off of the fact that they couldn't communicate to loved ones and not because we didn't have the technology for them to keep living. And this is also post 9/11. There were soldiers coming back with PTSD, students with burnout and depression. And it was really frustrating to see all these individuals going through these kinds of conditions. And what was at least enlightening is that there was technology to work and help some of these individuals, even track some of these neurodegenerative diseases. And it's called EEG. It looks like this. It's a giant cap system. It has these metal electrodes on the inside, spiky little things everywhere. It kind of looks like a torture device, just to be honest with you. But I'll pass it around real quick. Go ahead and mess around with it. And EEG is incredible. It lets you get so much valuable information of the human brain, but the thing is it doesn't scale, right? And so in 2011 at the University of Michigan, we worked on an artificial intelligence. This artificial intelligence actually increases the signal to noise, so how well we can pick up the quality of brain data, so that essentially what used to be these large cap systems, and by the way, this took us 10 years to do, so this was not an overnight success. 10 years to do, 6,000 people worth of data, 9 published papers, 33 different patents, but essentially we've been able to take what was traditionally this large cap system and get 90% of the same signal source all in a pair of headphones and earbuds. So you can see here there's these silver fabrics around the ear cup. These are the things that actually record your brain activity. And what we do is we're actually a B2B company. We license our technology to major headphone and earbud companies in the world. So just a show of hands, how many of you have a pair of headphones, earbuds, or even hearing aids? Everybody, keep your hand up, keep your hand up. I'm going to ask this question again 5 years from now, but the question is going to be how many of you have a Neurable powered device with you? And the same amount of hands are going to go up. Because some of the companies that we're licensing this technology to sell up to 5 million units a month. So it gives you a big idea. This first company that we worked with is called Master and Dynamic. You can actually already pick these up right now. Pass these around. But essentially, they give you a high capability of access to the brain. And they just launched them at CES, where they won 8 different awards for the tech. It enables you to track your focus and mental health. It's essentially like an Apple Watch for your brain, right? And just like the Apple Watch started out for tracking heart rate and movement, and now can do heart arrhythmias and Parkinson's, this will start as a device for focus and attention and transition into a device that can pick up information such as ADHD, traumatic brain injuries, Alzheimer's detection, etc. These are all things that have already been done with EEG before in the past, but now can be done at scale. We also work with the Army. They are actually our biggest customer. We have $4 million worth of contracts with them, and we're expecting to close another $15 million worth of contracts with them, hopefully this year. And what they're doing is, right now, one of the biggest issues in soldiers is fatigue-related accidents. It causes about $3 billion worth of damages every single year. And so they're going to be integrating us into existing form factors for soldiers. And at first, it's starting out for preventing these fatigue-related accidents. We actually have a Nature paper with the University of Graz, where 30 minutes before a truck driver got into an accident, we were able to detect it and prevent it from happening. Right? But then long-term, these soldiers also have a lot of blast exposure that they deal with. Right? This causes a lot of long-term dementia and other types of issues. We can now start to see that in the field, in real time, identify what is causing this damage, and then also tell them, hey, how much time you need to take off in order to allow more recovery to happen. So we call this first step our one small step for man, right? It enables us to tackle the areas of safety and wellness inside everyday devices like you see in front of you right now. But as they mentioned earlier in this conversation, brain-computer interfaces can open up the world to so much more. For example, device interaction. the headphones that you see passing around, and this is going to be very basic. It's not going to be anything like Paradromics or Neuralink, but they actually allow you to switch music tracks using brain activity. Right? So very simple forms of interaction that you can then use with your technology. Imagine as this transitions to augmented reality. You don't want to carry extra controllers or learn how to use extra devices. You just want to put on a pair of AR glasses and have a control system. You're going to start to see this first roll out with some of the headphones and earbuds that you buy in the next 5 years. But then, as more data is collected, there's a lot of applications in therapeutics and clinical diagnostics. Out of the data set of 6,000 people we already have, we have a really strong biomarker, for example, for ADHD. Right? But now we're also teaming up with different labs around the world so that they can study their disease states as well, too. Right? There's a group in Colombia, for example, that can track Alzheimer's and potentially give you a diagnosis up to 10 years before you start feeling the symptoms. But right now, what you have to do to use that system is put on that giant torture device that I showed you, go to their lab at least once a month, and do this for years for them to track a biomarker. Imagine that your Apple AirPods or your headphones that you just wear one day send you an alert and tell you, hey, you're trending in this direction. You know, the type of science that we can do is going to be incredible because we're going to catch it earlier than ever before. Right? The type of work that we can do to treat individuals with neurodegenerative diseases is going to absolutely revolutionize the world of medicine and science. And that's just going to be an organic part of your wearable device, just like you see the Apple Watch doing right now for so many incredible health spaces. So I didn't know that this wasn't supposed to be a pitch, but I got a different memo. But we are raising capital. We have only about $1.5 million remaining. But we have some incredible people that work with us, including Ultratech, Capital Factory, which thank you for the opportunity to be up here. And most importantly, if you want to try out the technology yourself, we have a demo in the booth over there. You'll actually be controlling something with your brain activity using the headphones that are coming across the aisles right now. So thank you all so much for your time.